Okay, so I guess we are starting this week's webinar. I'd like to start by welcoming everybody to our webinar. Thanks for joining. I'm just wondering whether we should wait 1 or 2 more minutes to let other participants in. Okay. So today we'll focus around guest communication and interaction. So before everyone joins, I'll actually start by presenting myself. My name is Soraya Letra. I'm the Chief Business Officer, Chief Business Development Officer at IlPlanet, where I oversee our network of partners all around the globe. And as you know, we have been hosting this series of webinars to support hoteliers, our clients, but not exclusively, to get ready for the ramp up. And today we're going to talk about communication, right? Why have we chosen this topic? Well, that's because communication is key, and in times of crisis, even more. So before we actually start, and I think that we can still give like 1 or 2 minutes for people to join in. And before I present our guest, I'm going to tell you a bit more of the technical aspect of this webinar. So for those that have been with us in the previous webinars, let me tell you that this one will be slightly different. There will be no handouts, there will be no slide decks, so it's not going to be a typical presentation. We are actually going to be talk. So today I have invited GuestJoy, Bookboost, and hotelinking. I will be introducing very, very shortly. They're all experts in guest interaction and communication, and will tell you how to tackle the challenges of online communication right now. So this is going to be more like a webinar guest speaker, more like a debate. What hasn't changed in regards to our last webinars is the fact that you can pose us questions at any time. You probably see that we have enabled the panel list. So actually, for everyone that has questions, you can submit them at any time. And then at the end, we will go through them, okay? If you're finding any technical issue, if you cannot pose a question for any reason, just let us know. We have our colleague Ellie in the backstage, and she will help you fixing that out. Now, my last request before we start, if you have a question that you want to address in particular to any of our guests, just type the guest names before the question. Otherwise, I guess that our guest just will just answer to your questions randomly. Okay. Now, I think the technical part is over. Just let me check how many participants do we have right now. Okay, I think it's time for us to join then, to start then. And I'll start by introducing the panelists. So today with us we have Dan Devlin. That is one of the founders and CEO at Bookboost, which is a state-of-art guest messaging platform. Say hi, please, Dan.
Hi, happy to be here. Thank you for having me, Soraya. Looking forward to the webinar.
Thank you for joining. Together with us today, we'll have also Andrew Martin. He's a customer experience manager at GuestJoy, which is a complete guest experience platform. Hi, Andrew.
Hi, hey, everybody. Thanks for coming along and thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you for joining. And we also have Paula Navarro, who's the Global Development Manager at hotelinking, a full guest journey automation platform. Hi, Paula.
Hi, Soraya, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having us. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so thank you. Actually, it's me who thank you for accepting our invitation. So on behalf of Wild Planet, a very big thanks. Thanks for being here and for sharing your expertise with our audience in the next let's say, 40 minutes. Okay, I'll start then by posing you some questions. And so like in the last weeks, there's a lot going on, right? And from what we are seeing, from what we can hear and read, we have realized that the outbreak of COVID seems somehow to be forcing digitalization in the hotel workplace. And it is fostering better interaction with guests. And now you have been in the tech space for quite some time and you're very, very much involved in guest messaging. Is that what we can hear and read true? I mean, has things changed? And if yes, what has already changed? And what else might change? I would start with Dan. Dan, what is your opinion?
Thank you, Soraya. Yeah, well, things have absolutely changed. And I mean, our mind is with all the hoteliers that have been put in this situation. And we at Bookboost Guest Messaging, we try to position ourselves to be of help and to make it as easy for them to reach out to companies like us to help them. Because as you mentioned, that's right on point. I believe that, especially in crisis, maybe more than ever now, it's so important to be in touch with your guests, to build a relationship with your guests. And where before COVID, just thinking back over that time, I mean, usually our meetings were around how to make hotel operations more efficient with new technologies and also how to enhance the experience. Whereas now, since COVID kicked in, that conversation has pretty much expanded because on the guest side of things, the expectations have changed. There's more uncertainty. So there's more demand for questions to the hotels. The supply-demand situation has changed, obviously. I mean, safety today is more or less has become more or less a competitive advantage. It's sometimes difficult to reach the hotel. And then for the hotelier's perspective, I mean, obviously occupancy and RevPAR has been going down. So now a hotelier is expected to keep the same level of service against much lower margins. You want to protect your employees. You want to protect your guests for safety purposes. So a lot has changed, and technology can definitely play a role. And that's how we try to position ourselves to get that point across, to help hoteliers through this time. And also, as the CEO of Hilton, Chris Nazzetta, said, that the comeback will heavily depend on how quickly contactless features can be rolled out. So yeah, things have changed, and we should all be thinking about how to prepare ourselves as best and how to use this time now to be ready and ideally to be better when the market is back to normal.
And Andrew, do you agree that things have been changed? What else will be changing?
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because there are some things that will permanently change, and there are some things which will be a temporary change.
In communication.
Yes, and what we found is as soon as the bad times started, we noticed that we had certain customers who were far more proactive with reaching out to their guests, letting them know about the safety measures that they had in place. And then we have other customers who weren't as proactive. So I think what's really going to be important for every property is to be proactive with the communication. It's up to you to reassure your guests. It's not their job to go and find out what information you have available on what you've changed at your hotel. So I think that being proactive is going to be one of the biggest changes, because not everybody's a little bit different with how they do communication. So that's probably one of the really important things. I have to say that it varies by market. So, for example, the Polish market did well, but is still influenced by the patterns going around the rest of the world.
So were they proactive?
They were proactive in, I think, just as a country, avoiding the worst of it. They were one of the lucky countries to not have so much harm, and perhaps that's going to give Polish people, at least, the confidence to travel internally. But to compare that, the Irish market, they had a quick shutdown of hotels, but some of our customers have been telling us that some of these measures that they will put in place are only going to be temporary. So it's really tough to find out what the right balance is going to be. So, for example, constantly reassuring guests about the cleanliness of the hotel and the practices they've put in place. Is that going to last only another 3 months? Is it going to be 12 months? Is it going to be permanent? It's going to vary by country, we think.
Okay, but do you think that from country to country, we have more proactive and less proactive hoteliers?
I would say so. We just noticed these certain patterns in certain countries. Not going to name names or anything like that, but we definitely noticed that some countries were really quick to say, right, we have to get in touch with all of our customers and reassure them of what we're doing and how we're taking care of their safety so that they can have a good stay and a safe stay at that property. So yeah, we've definitely noticed a few differences from country to country across Europe.
Okay, and Paolo, do you agree that proactiveness is one of the things that has changed when it comes to guest communication and interaction?
Yeah, proactive definitely hit the spot. I mean, having guest interaction and communication has been something so important for a very long time, and it's always been constantly changing. But right now, due to COVID, there is a very big necessity for people to communicate, especially to have all these interactions, because whilst communicating, people feel that they are understood and that they can also understand. So as Dan said before as well, there is a type of uncertainty here, and people do need to have all these types of communications to get that safety into them. So I can pinpoint like just 3 different things that I feel are definitely changing. As the question poses in itself, digitalization is not just being seen to be forced, but it's kind of digitalization as an obligation, the use of it as an obligation, not just only for to be in the hype of things or to be cool or to be how other hotels, but in the hotel industry, solutions like ours are there to definitely help all of our clients. And within this, it would definitely be digitalization as an obligation. Within this obligation, we can start to see that the use of cell phones or tablets, individual ones, are definitely very important. So to have communication with the hotel guests through things such as their emails or their phone numbers, SMS, push notifications, this is something very important. And finally, well, everything that has to do with personalization, it's always been important, but now more than ever, because hotel guests, they don't want to be receiving, irrelevant information. It's all about the information that you're giving them and if it's accurate and if it's fresh.
Okay, so we have proactiveness, digitalization, personalization, right? What about timing? I mean, has the timing to first contact, to first engage with the guest changed as well? What I mean is that for a long time, guest engagement seemed to start at the front desk. So many hoteliers thought that pre-communication wasn't really that important, that, okay, the guest booked, the business was secured. So the focus was actually when the guest entered the hotel and was at the front desk at the moment of check-in. So now that has changed, and many hotels, OTAs as well, they have actually realized that guest communication and guest experience does not start at the front desk. It actually starts much earlier. It starts at the moment when a guest books a room, not at the reception. Now, you guys, we go even further. And tech providers like you are talking a lot about pre-booking communication. And we have also seen this happening with other technical providers like OTAs. I mean, Airbnb had it. Now Booking.com launches the pre-booking messaging feature. I guess this is the name of the feature. And this feature is allowing travelers to contact the property before the book. So this makes me think that the notion of best timing to first engage with a guest has also changed and is changing. So my question is, after all, when is it the best moment to start interaction with a guest? Andrew?
Well, the simple answer is immediately, as we've already suggested. This kind of
is that when the booking happens?
Yes, so I think that it's really important for a hotel to establish a relationship with the guest immediately. Doesn't matter the source of the booking, whether it was direct, whether it was OTA or otherwise. I kind of have two parts to my answer here. The first thing is, okay, so Booking has launched its messaging platform. But that's just another thing for staff to have to do. I mean, are we supposed to go onto every separate OTA and manually message all of these customers and have separate points of contact for customers depending on where they've come from? I think it's really important for the hotel to reach out directly to the guest and practically ignore these messaging platforms that the OTAs have established. Because let's face it, if an OTA does something, it's not because they have the hotel in mind, it's they have themselves in mind. So for a hotel to take control of that relationship, reach out to the guest immediately and say, hey, thanks for the booking, perhaps, and from there to be able to offer upsell or cross-sell, or to provide relevant information, that's going to be more important. Let the OTA bring you the booking, but don't let them take the customer relationship away, because that's what you should be providing as the hotel. Now, as for when is the best time, there's a lot of, there's no real correct answer, but it depends on the goal of your communications with the guest. So whether you're trying to provide information, whether you're trying to upsell or cross-sell, whether you're trying to provide online check-in. Of course, we don't want to flood anybody with too much communication, but you just need to be mindful of when these touch points are. So, for example, if you take airlines as the example, if you're trying to offer online check-in for your guests, it's usually 2 days beforehand that you ask the guest to check in. So with that in mind, so that you're not flooding the guest with communication, perhaps you'll send your upselling message a week before, or maybe even 10 days before. The key is to make sure you're not overwhelming the guest with communication, but it is really important for hotels to establish the relationship with the guest directly, rather than having to go on all these separate platforms and manage this communication, which is just a nightmare. I mean, it's adding work to the staff's jobs, not streamlining it. So we don't see these as a very beneficial thing.
And Paula, do you think there is a right moment to start interaction? I mean, you guys, as you know, as a guest journey automation platform, do you also see this that way? Like, yes, immediately, most probably once the booking happens, and of course, depending on the purpose of the communication.
Yeah, so just wanted to say before answering the question that what Andrew was speaking about before, taking the hotels taking control of their clients and being able to have that relationship and that interaction with them is basically the most important issue that we can see here. And once you have that control, you're able to do so many things after that. And that's when you're able to make sure that that client is loyal for the hotel brand. So said this, I can pinpoint 2 different moments, which I believe to be, correct for that initial communication. And it just depends on what point that potential guest or that guest finds themselves in the hotel brand. So basically, if a potential guest has not visited that hotel brand or has not had any type of communication with them previously, they probably find themselves at the hotel website and they probably want to make a reservation. So we all know how difficult it is just to have leads on the hotel website. So once you do have a lead there, you want to do everything as possible to retain that lead and make sure that there are, there's a little bit of stimulation on the website. It's not just about the website being pretty. So for this, I just wanted to share my screen with you guys so you can take a look at, just an example, solutions such as, a web widget can be very useful in these cases, and just wanted to show you how ours is working. It's just, a regular Bellbot, a web widget, and within this web widget, we can see that it's personalizable and it just has different areas that you can establish a specific message and you can establish an offer, advantages, etc. And within this, you're just trying to have that extra bit, that extra push of interaction. And you're asking here for client information. And in this case, if you're not having that specific, you're not collecting that information, such as that email, you're kind of losing those possibilities to have an impact on this client once they leave your website. You're losing that opportunity for a future reservation. So, we can have those types of interactions before any potential client has arrived to the hotel, or we can also have that interaction because we don't always have the possibility to impact a client before they have stepped into the hotel. So we can also have that interaction once they stepped into the hotel by, making sure that they have special offers or discounts depending on the different areas of the hotel, or even personalized vouchers. This is just an example here of one of the vouchers that we have upon arrival. So, one of these personalized vouchers, which we can get all this different information, all of these different preferences from the PMS system. So, to be a little bit in summary, it just depends on the moment that the client is finding themselves in, and it just depends on what the hotel wants to do. But most importantly, having that control and making sure that you can establish that relationship with them is very key.
Okay, so it can be before, it can be at the hotel, but the most important is that hotels take control over communication. Ben, would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Paula and Andrew said some really good things there. And in addition, I also believe you have to be looking at what channels your guests use and then be accessible on those. Like sometimes guests have over 80 touch points even before they make a booking. So already in that phase of the guest journey,
For example,
going to social media, going to OTAs, back to the website, back to OTAs, and there's like often an entire path. So how to capture interest,
so
and
how to communicate with them in all these touch points?
I'm sorry, once again.
Okay, how to have the perfect guest interaction in all these touch points?
Yeah, so to funnel channels into one system, so that you don't have the hurdle of having to click to all those different platforms. I totally am with you there, Andrew. But there are technologies today that can help you with that, and then to make yourself accessible. Because when your guest has a question, it's about taking that as an opportunity to create something from that, like Paula mentioned. And for instance, on the website, like if you work with those kind of tools, you can also provide self-help. So it doesn't mean that you always need to be there manually yourself, but you can actually, for up to 92%, offer tools where guests can help themselves. So up to 92% is able to help themselves with, for instance, such a widget on the website. And then it's also about, so after the booking has been made, just to go a little bit in those phases, and it's already been mentioned that relevancy and personalization is so important when you reach out to the guest. So in addition, what you can also do is after the booking. I'm sorry, Soraya, I didn't hear the question.
Messages should be personalized, going back to what Paula said before about personalization.
Absolutely, and you can also make that interactive. So for instance, trigger a message after the booking has been made, and actually asking the guest what kind of information they appreciate receiving and on what channel. So then you're really starting to get to know your guest, and that's personalization that we're talking about, because you want to be relevant.
asking the guest what he needs, not expecting the guest to tell you what he needs.
Exactly. Because if you don't know the guest, you don't know what information to share. And I think that's where the industry is at today. That unfortunately, the situation is that often a guest receives like a list of information, and that list doesn't feel relevant for me because maybe I need one thing from that list or two things. So when you first send a message to start to get to know the guest and ask them what they need, and then send relevant information, then you can also use that for purposes like Andrew mentioned, for instance, going into cross-selling, because you know that it's relevant for that specific guest.
So communication can be at the same time an opportunity for upsell. Would you agree, guys?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah.
I said guys, but I was also asking you.
Definitely, for sure. And it's so important what Dan just said about getting to know your guest and everything that has to do with their preferences, because that's the way that you're going to be able to personalize as much as possible and not fill them up with unnecessary communications and unnecessary information where they're just going to feel as though they're another number.
Okay. I'm so glad that you are all on the same page. I mean, you all mutually agree. I mean, you all agree that pre-stay communication is important, that, communication can actually be a tool for upselling, which is good. But still, I have one question. So, Paula, you said that a good moment to start interaction with guests is actually, for example, when they're coming to your website. So that would be, for example, pre-stay communication, right? But I guess that one thing that hasn't changed is that interaction is still very important during stay, right? So it's not only about communicating with your guests just after they book, but also when they are at the hotel. Now, with this thing of social distancing on everyone's lips, and which is actually it's even mandatory in many markets. I'm wondering how hoteliers can still, incorporate good communication techniques and good guest experience techniques at arrival, during the stay, and at the same time ensuring that they are doing this and keeping, safety for their guests. Paula.
Of course, yeah. From like what I said from my first question, a lot of digitalization comes into play here. And I think that it's safe to say that upon arrival, solutions such as an auto check-in solution, which we're currently developing at the moment, it's safe to say that solutions like these, they don't just come in handy now, but are starting to become almost like a must-have. And not only is the solution something that is compliant with that social distancing that now we do need to take into account, but it's also something that is fresh and makes sure that there is like that sense of relief and comfort in the front desk. So this would be something that I believe is very useful for that on arrival situation, to make sure that there is safety, especially. And it's just a matter of during stay, keeping up with all that guest messaging that our solutions provide, and keeping up with all these interactions that, for example, before, if you were to, want to suggest a late checkout, for example, you would go to the front desk and maybe they'd tell you, okay, so the day before you're going to leave, just come back and let us know. We'll tell you if there's availability. Now it's best to avoid these types of situations. So we're definitely going to that cell phone, tablet use, and we're definitely going to these communications during stay in which we can, let the hotel guests know about anything that has to do with special offers. We can send the hotel real-time alerts letting them know that it will be someone's birthday or it was someone's birthday, etc. We can also do things like, yeah.
Does it mean that this is the end of, front desk as we know it, the end of, the regular check-in, the regular guest interaction at the reception as we know it?
Okay, so no, I'm a very big fan of everything that has to do with digitalization, taking into account my age. Not going to say it, but definitely I was in touch. I was in touch with some colleagues that I have in the States that do work in the hotel industry, and I was listening to some of their interviews the past month. And one of the things that definitely hit the spot was we cannot lose that human factor. We cannot lose that human touch. So definitely now will be a time to make sure that social distancing is done. And, you know, it's just safety measures. But once everything starts going back to normal, it's important to know that that sense of humanity and that sense of having interactions not only through you know, digital means, but also at the hotel, within the staff, etc. That's also very important, and I think that that's never going to disappear. People, we're not robots. Well, maybe some of us are, I'm not sure, but that's always going to be something very heartwarming for us, and that we're always going to need. So these are just certain measures that we can adapt to now because of COVID, and we do need to adapt. So, you know, things like having these communications, such as what I was saying before, real-time alerts for birthdays, for recurring guests, satisfaction surveys, you name it, etc. These are all very important now, since we can't really have that human touch, but it's never really going to disappear. I don't know if anyone also agrees with this.
Maybe then, do you agree? Are we going to have these platforms replacing, you know, the nice receptionist, or not really?
Yeah, I think Paula said it right. It's about empowering humans basically with technology. So with technology, you can automate recurring processes that then free up time for your receptionist to still spend time with your guest. But then rather than to have them ask for filling in forms and stuff like that, you can have a good conversation. And it's also about giving your guests the options. So perhaps some guests, they prefer to check online by themselves. Perhaps some do not. But by giving them options, you can already like become much more efficient and also make your guests feel more comfortable. And just one tip that we usually give here to also look at this holistically is what you can do today at home or in the hotel, or gather your team or do it by yourself. Just like sit down and look at your guest journey. So you can do this workshop by yourself. It's also something we facilitate for our customers, and you can go quite deep with this, like really looking into who is my guest, who are those personas, and really going deep. But you can also keep it simpler and just look at the different stages of your guest journey. Think of your guest and also keeping in mind this new situation, like what will be their needs now, and then throughout the guest journeys, what moments are important and what touch points do I put in place to be in control and to provide options for my guests so that they can already like service themselves and that they can already help themselves. And then you're in charge of the process. And then when you have that guest journey mapped out, you will also know what technologies you're looking for. So that's something you can already do today. And totally with Paula here, like it's all about creating these implementations of workflows and technologies to help the guests and also to become more efficient as from the hotelier's perspective, so that you can use your human resources, either decrease the amount that you need and becoming less dependent on them, or use them for either quality rather than to do recurring processes. Yeah.
Andrew, are you with Paula and Dan? Do you think that technology and this kind of platforms we have been talking about can ensure a seamless and safe experience for the guests and for the hoteliers as well at the end of the day?
Yeah, so the safety aspect is going to be immediate and super important in the short to medium term. But I think we're at a really interesting point in history here, because famously a lot of parts of the hospitality sector kind of shun or stay away from technology or big changes or little changes, and especially the word automation. I think it carries a lot of negativity in the hotel sector, but really...
But that's changing, right?
Sorry?
But that's changing, right?
Absolutely. And that's why this is an interesting point in history, because it's now becoming necessary to adopt these technologies and to automate processes. And the way we see it is that being able to automate these processes gives you two major benefits. Number one, you can provide that customized, tailored guest experience. You can look at all the touch points in your guest journey and say, here's what I want to achieve at each one of them. But then you just take your hands off, and I'm sure all three of us can say that everything just ticks over nicely in the background. The benefit of that is you're freeing up your human staff to perform, to actually provide the human side of the guest journey, even now with these times of like high safety and the low contact. We've always been really pro the fact that people choose hotels over Airbnbs because they want to have the hotel experience. Airbnb and hotels, they're more distinct than ever, because if I go to a hotel, it's because I want to be looked after. I want to have that experience. I want to have people wait after me. If I'm just looking for a place to sleep and I'm not worried about any of that, maybe I will choose an Airbnb. So that's why it's really important now to provide that specialized experience for the guest, all without having to do much at your side at the hotel, because it's automated. So the automation side of things is really good here. And it allows you, as we always say, it allows your staff to do what they should be doing the most, is to provide these guests with a great experience, rather than, as Dan said, doing these monotonous, repetitive tasks that are better served by automating them and getting the face-to-face contact. Even if there's a plastic screen in between, getting that human contact is what people want when they go and choose a hotel.
Okay. But is the notion of guest experience changing as well?
Somewhat. I mean, from our side, we've already seen a lot of our customers who are actually saying, well, what can we do to adapt to this new environment? And yes, there will be less contact. In the short to medium term, it's going to probably be that, there won't be a breakfast area anymore. Instead, you might have breakfast delivered to your room. And you'll need to have the guest tell you their preference for that, and you might even be charging for that. So in some ways, in the immediate future, the guest experience might seem a little cold because we have to, as has already been said, there are regulations now that have to be adhered to. Eventually they will be lifted or lessened, and you can have more of that contact and human contact come back into it. But for the time being, it might seem a little more isolated, but let's hope that doesn't last.
Okay, so we have been talking about pre-booking communication and interaction, or the new interaction at the hotel, but communication is not ending the moment the checkout happens, right?
Yeah, so every part of the guest journey includes post the stay. And so, and especially now, it's going to be important to be able to get an idea of how your guests were satisfied with their experience, and also more than ever to drive positive reviews on common platforms that we know that something in the mid 70% of people will go and look at review platforms when they're making a decision about the hotel that they want to stay in. So being able to get that valuable feedback directly to your property, to be able to drive the reviews that's going to increase bookings, and also to retarget people in future as well, to say, if you book your next stay directly with us, here's a code you can use for a discount off your booking. It's all about retaining the business down the line in the future. It's everybody's goal to get as much repeat business as possible, and that's why post-departure, that part of the guest journey is just as important, because you need to be able to reach out to your guests and give them these offers, show that you appreciate that they chose your property in the first place, and to get, I mean, not every guest experience is perfect. So to be able to get feedback directly from the guest about what went wrong or what they didn't like about their stay is as valuable as getting the booking in the first place. A really useful thing is to be able to reach out to guests in some circumstances and smooth things over. So it's a really, really valuable thing to have.
Okay, and Andrew, you mentioned guest retention. So how to actually win guest loyalty with communication strategy? Dan, how do you think this is possible?
Yeah, so the key word here is relationships. So, and the good thing is also what we talked about before is that when you start to build a relationship earlier on in their journey, I mean, ideally as early on as possible, and you manage to make it personal, then a guest will open up to you. So you're not like a corporate entity sort of, but you're more like a friend, and even if it's on messaging, like you're literally a friend in their friends list. So then they start to open up. And when you then, I mean, for whatever purpose it is during the journey, like moving towards checkout here and post checkout, if you then ask for feedback, and actually before checkout you should ask for feedback, not after, because then you can still do something about it. When you've succeeded to build a personal relationship, the guests will be open and will be willing to provide you that feedback. Whereas when they've had a great experience, they will also be happy to share that, because this is a brand, you're a person they want to be part of, so they want to share that with their contacts and they also want to get back to you because you've managed to create an experience and you've managed to leave them a memory, and that's what sticks to the mind. So then a few months in after, when you then think back and you still have that positive feeling, then you want to come back to that specific hotel. So it's all about being able to build a personal relationship, create an experience, and leave memories. And then you will see that you will increase your loyalty.
Paula, I could see that you were doing this while Dan was speaking. So I think you agree that this is all about relationship, creating relationship. This is how you get guest loyalty.
Yeah, definitely. I agree completely with what both Andrew and Dan have said before about that reputation. It's so important to know as much information and have that opinion from the guests in your hotel during the stay, because that's when you're going to be able to take action, and that's when they're going to feel heard. They're going to feel understood, as what I was speaking in the first question. And once you have that information, you're going to be able to do something about it. And super important what Dan said before about making memories. This is something also that my colleagues from the States, they're always on to me about this. Like, you have to make memories, because once you make that memory, it's not just going to be another stay at a hotel. There are so many different hotels around the world. It's not just going to be another stay, but it's going to be that experience. And the guest experience, in my opinion, it's like the definition of guest experience. There isn't really a definition. It's guest experience is what each of us feel is our best guest experience. And we all have our different opinions on this, and we all have our different preferences. So apart from being very important to know that satisfaction on a satisfaction level during stay, it's also super important on that post checkout to have information and being able to collect all this data from the guests at your hotel to be able to communicate with them afterward, because maybe during stay there weren't the most accurate communications, or nothing really did impact them, but you're going to be able to do so afterward and have different touch points during their lifespan, where it doesn't just end at the checkout and, you know, it was just another stay, it was just another hotel, and I never knew anything about them. You're going to be able to get all of their information, all of their different preferences. You're going to know what level of satisfaction they had during the stay, and you're going to be able to create more communications for them on a positive and relevant note, as relevant as possible. You're going to be able to make segmentation for your marketing campaigns. Nowadays, we're looking a lot into micro segmentation, so it's super important to have as much info as possible from them so that you can make it, again, personalizable. And all these different interactions that can be arriving to these guests, they can be as on spot as possible to make sure that they will be a recurring guest and that they will love your brand, they will come back, and they'll just keep on doing it. So definitely agree with what my colleagues said before.
Andrew, I don't know if you would like to add something to what has been said about guest loyalty, about experiences, memories.
Yeah, I think that everything has been said really well, and the relationship comment was a particularly pertinent one. But one other thing that I might want to add to it in general is because if you're using systems like the three of us have, or even if you're manually writing emails to your guests, which I have found some people still do, I think that it's important to also remember to be authentic as well, and to be able to be authentic means that your content is relevant and personalized to that guest. You don't want to seem robotic. You really want to keep that human element to any of this interaction that you have with your guests. So I think that's another thing to just bear in mind in the market that you operate, or if you want to target different nationalities or cultures, then to be mindful of how to be authentic in those areas as well.
Okay, perfect. I don't know. Does anyone would like to add something on this, on guest loyalty with communication strategy? I guess we have actually touched pretty much everything.
I think one thing has been untouched during this conversation. Well, at least one thing, that it's also about convenience, right? So in the same. Yeah, in the same discussion as how to build a personal relationship, how can you make it as convenient for the guest and as easy for the guest to engage with your brand as possible? So also my recommendation is that you start looking at what channels your guests use and what they communicate, and then reach out to them on those channels. So for one, that might be email, but especially looking at closer to check-in and during the stay, you might be looking at more instant channels as well, because in best case, an email gets opened. In worst case, it ends up in the spam box and doesn't get opened. But for the least, it takes a bit of time, because it takes more time than answering a WhatsApp message or a SMS message. So
again, there is no one size fits all.
Exactly. It's knowing your guest, knowing their preferences, and then catering towards them. So also that comes down to what channels your guest prefers to use. I mean, someone from China obviously uses WeChat, right? Whereas in Europe, we're more used to other channels such as WhatsApp, Facebook, etc. So when you're going into instant channels, also look at where does the majority of my guests come from, and what channels can I use to make it as easy for them to engage with my hotel.
Good. Wow, thank you. that was very inspiring. It was lovely to have you here and telling us, how can we look at the role of technology, innovation, guest journey, and how can hoteliers approach guests differently in different channels, and how interaction can be different nowadays. I think that some of our participants have posed some questions while we were having this fruitful discussion. So I think this is probably the best time to answer their questions. So give me 1 second. I'll start from the very beginning. Okay, let me scroll up. Okay, so one of our participants, Grzegorz Borowski, he has posted the following question. It's not addressed at anyone in particular, so any of you can answer. And Mr. Grzegorz is asking, hi, could you provide some examples of best tools that can be used to communicate with guests? So far, we've been running automatic messages, replies using Booking.com, built it tool, and we are also sending automatic text messages through app integrated with our PMS. So pretty much the basics. So who would like to answer to Grzegorz?
Yeah, I think we all three would like to take that question, right?
Okay, so 1 minute for each one of you.
Sitting on our chairs. Now, I can start and keep it short. I mean, I think it's pretty much in line with what I tried to explain in my previous point, that it's about being accessible on the channels that your guests prefer to use, and for the hotelier to look into solutions where that aggregates into one system, because you don't want the the pain of having to keep track of all these different platforms. Like sometimes when I speak with receptionists and look at what they have opened just at the same time, it's like more than 15 tabs, right? I mean, that drives you nuts. So how can you use tools that aggregate that into one system and then be accessible for your guests on the channels that they prefer, and also use automation to indeed proactively reach out, so that's a flow, that you don't need to do that manually over and over again, but that you set that up once so that you already provide your guests with the needed information as much as you can, so that you lower the need for the guests to reach out to you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Paula, Andrew, would you like to add something to Grzegorz' question?
Yeah, definitely agreeing with what Dan just said. I think that it's very important to find tools in which, when you're looking for these types of solutions, tools in which you're not just, you don't have a million things in one. You can just do it all through that same tool, and everything is as clear as possible, and everything is of course automated so that you're able to keep it as clear and quick as possible, and it's not taking up more time from any of the staff at the hotel. But basically, it's just, I think that these two, as Dan has said, these are two of the specific pinpoints that we need to have when looking for this type of tools to communicate. But the important thing is that they do want to communicate, and this is something very positive, and this is a very positive tendency that we're seeing now in hoteliers, in which they do want to take that control that we spoke about earlier and have that communication and start that relationship. So yeah, just keep in mind these two pinpoints would be my advice.
Okay. Andrew, would you add something to what has been said by Dan?
I think it's really good that anybody is trying to consider a better way to communicate with their guests. But what I would say is, whenever you're thinking about this, is think about what are you trying to achieve using this communication. So what are the goals? And then to look for a system that works well in the background. Basically, a system like mine, a system like my colleagues here, it's not the PMS. If the PMS goes down, then it's an emergency. We're an important system, but a secondary system. So therefore, you don't want a system like ours to be a hassle or to be difficult to set up. And I think all three of us would testify that our systems are nice and easy to set up, and they'll just happily run in the background. The only time that a staff member really needs to be concerned with our systems is once the guest actually says, I want something. Yes, I want that anniversary package in my room because we're staying for that reason. So these systems should always just be a beautiful complement and invisible technology that makes everybody's, the hotel guest stay and the staff, makes it a lot easier and a better experience.
Okay. By the way, Grzegorz is also asking, and I don't know if this is the right moment to answer that one, if any of you guys have a kind of sales manager in Krakow. If you want to answer that one, or just contact Grzegorz after our dinner.
Absolutely, we can be in touch.
Okay, I'm wondering if we have other questions. I can't see any, but perhaps Ellie, who's on the backstage, can display some, if there are other questions from our participants today. Okay, I don't think we have any other questions. If you haven't posed any questions during the session, you can still do it. So the Q&A mode is still open. Okay, we have a very, very shy audience today, I think, or everything was perfectly explained, so there are no questions. So thank you so much.
Yeah, let's go with that option.
We explained it, we said it.
Yeah.
Oh, perhaps Soraya, because I see Gregor's posted another message there about the implementation of such solutions, and to Andrew's point, I think I can speak for all of us here that, I mean, today there's so many systems that live in the cloud, right? So it's not compared to like the legacy systems from before. There's still some out there where it's so costly to try something, and like the barrier to start something and see how things work has been so huge in our industry. But luckily today, innovation is happening, and companies like ours and many others make it so accessible to try things out. So my recommendation is really like trying is the best, and to Andrew's point there as well, like always have your goal in mind and then look for something that's relevant and just try it out. Like today it's not costly. I think also that I'm not sure of, but at least we are flexible during COVID, trying to help out. I think many companies are, and just to help hoteliers, because we want to move forward and enhance the experience and also make operations more efficient, because I think we all understand how challenging it is now for our industry.
Yeah, definitely. Don't be scared to try things out. And, I've had some hoteliers tell me things like, I've been doing the same thing for 40 years and I don't want to change it because this is just how I like for things to be. And, obviously there are things that are true and they're always going to work. But if you don't try things out and if you don't innovate, at some point, you're just going to get stuck behind. So I'm very glad to see that solutions like ours are helping out the hotel industry to try out new things and to just have a better experience and make it just easier for them to get things done. So as Dan just said, try things out, don't be afraid, and just get in touch with us for any type of solution that has to do with all this interaction with the guests, because it's super important. And especially now, this is a moment when we've had potential clients reach out to us and just be like, okay, we're ready, because we know that this is the moment. If not before, now is definitely a good moment. So, just try us out.
Andrew, would you like to add something to what your colleagues have said?
Yeah, I think that all three of us would probably agree that trying out these things are, I think that, if you want to change the PMS in your property, that's a project. But something that a lot of people aren't really aware of is that trying out systems like ours, it's not a project. We have customers who get up and running in the same day after a couple of hours of work and a little bit of training. The whole point of what we do is that it is easy and simple to have these systems set up, whether they need our assistance or not, but we always obviously provide training for everybody who needs to use it. So the barrier to entry is very low, especially now. Lots of companies are offering free trials of these systems, so take advantage of it. It's like you've got a phone in your pocket. Can you imagine what your life would be like if you didn't have that phone anymore? The idea of our systems is that we fill these needs that aren't always obvious, and then after using them for a period of time, you look back and say, wow, how did I ever operate before? So yeah, I would say this is the perfect time to be able to look at systems like all three of us and say, what can I gain from this? I've got nothing to lose because I'm not going to pay anything.
It's not really a question, but GuestJoy has posted something which is somehow, it's provocative in a way that he's telling that, all these cloud solutions that we'll be talking about, they're easy to sell for people on their 20s or on their 30s. But he said, I can easily imagine 80% of the hotels run by people 40, 50, or 60. So how would you tell this to them, if that makes any change at all?
Yeah, I think this is part of the reason why our industry, maybe not only that, but when you look at other industries, they're just a little bit faster in adopting, and it's always been good decisions. Like look at the airline industry. They're typically a few steps ahead of our industry, right? Yeah, so I think this is also our responsibility, mission? Or at least, I see it as our role, that we just keep repeating our message and try to make as many people aware, because it's really
webinar.
Yeah, but that's why I'm so happy that to take part of this today, Soraya, really, because. For so many hoteliers out there, there's a great opportunity, but perhaps not everyone is aware. So yeah, absolutely. I think he's totally right, and yeah, we're trying to bring our message across.
Communicating that.
Yeah, yeah.
Communicating that. Okay, I don't know if anyone else has any questions. Let me check once again. I don't think so. Okay. In any case, if any of you, and I'm now talking to the participants, if you have questions, well, our guests be at your disposal. So you can always contact them after the webinar. Okay. Ellie, who's supporting us at the backstage, she's telling me that someone is typing. So we might have another question. Okay. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so if you have any other questions, just go ahead and contact any of our guests. They'll be here, they'll be there to help you. They will be there to communicate with you. And well, so I think it only remains for me to thank you. So I'm thanking my guests a lot for the excellent cooperation, not only today, but also during the preparation of this webinar. Thank you. A big thanks for the whole audience to participate. You know that we're organizing more webinars, so let me take this opportunity to encourage you to sign up for our next webinars. On behalf of Wild Planet, thank you all again. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Paula. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for our participants for joining them. Have a great day ahead then.
Thank you very much. Nice to meet
Ellie
you.
for the huge support.